There is a gun bolted to the outside of a stealth fighter. It is not hidden. It is not flush. It is hanging in the open air, wrapped in a carbon fiber shell the size of a bathtub, slung under the belly of a $100 million aircraft that was supposed to be invisible to radar. The Marines fly it. The Navy flies it. And every aerospace engineer who ever drew an area rule curve looks at that pod and winces. But the pod is winning an argument almost nobody is having. To understand why a gun ended up bolted to the outside of an F-35, you have to go back to a war that the United States Air Force entered convinced that guns were obsolete. In 1965, the F-4 Phantom II went into combat over North Vietnam with no internal cannon, on the theory that air-to-air missiles had made close-range gunnery a relic. The theory was wrong. The early AIM-9B Sidewinder could only track from directly behind a target's exhaust at a tracking rate of 11 degrees per second and couldn't be launched above 2G. The AIM-7 Sparrow required the pilot to fly straight and level while a MiG-21 closed the distance. In Vietnam, US fighter pilots fired 612 Sparrows and scored 56 kills, a kill probability of 9%. The F-4E eventually had an M61 Vulcan crammed into its nose. The lesson burned itself into every Western fighter requirements document written since. Build the missile, fire the missile, win at range, but carry a gun for the moment the missile fails. 6 decades later, the F-4's grandchildren still carry guns, and the number of air-to-air kills scored by gun in combat since the Falklands War rounds to approximately 0. Which raises the question, if nobody has killed anyone with a fighter gun in 40 years, why is the F-35 program, the most expensive weapons program in human history, fighting an internal engineering battle over where to put one? The F-22 Raptor solved it elegantly. Its M61A2 Vulcan sits buried in the upper fuselage above the right air intake, behind a flush stealth panel that opens only when the trigger is pulled. 6 barrels, 100 rounds per second, 480 rounds in the magazine. The Raptor's airframe was designed around the gun from day one, so the recoil flows into structure built to absorb it. The F-35A, the Air Force version, tried to do the same thing. A 4-barrel General Dynamics GAU-22 mounted internally on the left side of the fuselage, behind a flush panel hidden from radar. 180 rounds. By the book, the elegant answer. Except the F-35B and the F-35C had no room for it. The B is the Marine Corps variant, the one that takes off in a few hundred feet and lands vertically. To do that, it has a lift fan the size of a kitchen table behind the cockpit and a 3-bearing swivel module on the engine exhaust. Those two components consumed every cubic inch of space the gun was supposed to occupy. The F-35C is the Navy carrier variant. It has the largest wings of the family, reinforced landing gear for catapult launches and arrested recoveries, and 19,000 pounds of internal fuel. Every cubic inch was spoken for, so the engineers did what engineers do when physics leaves no room. They hung the gun outside. Here is what is actually in that pod. A 4-barrel rotary cannon firing at 3,300 rounds per minute. 55 rounds leaving the muzzle every second at 3,560 feet per second. Each round crosses 3 times the speed of sound before the target hears the first one arrive. 220 rounds wrapped in a helical feed system, a spiral of ammunition coiled like a clock spring around the gun's central axis. Recoil, 3,700 pounds force per burst, equivalent to the thrust of a small jet engine pushing backward into the airframe every time the pilot holds the trigger. The shell that wraps all of this is built by a Danish company called Terma in monolithic carbon fiber composite. The pod for the F-35B is designated the GPU-9/A. The pod for the F-35C is designated the GPU-8/A. They look identical from a distance. Same overall shape, same length, same outer mold line philosophy. They are not interchangeable. The fairing is contoured differently to match each variant's belly profile. The pilot does not aim by eye. The pilot does not aim by sight reticle. The pilot's helmet, a $400,000 piece of equipment called the Helmet-Mounted Display System, projects the firing solution directly onto the visor. The aircraft's AESA radar computes range, closing velocity, and intercept geometry in milliseconds. The pilot moves his head. The targeting box moves with his gaze. A burst controller limits each trigger pull to 30 or 40 rounds, 220 rounds in the magazine, 5 precise trigger pulls before the pod is empty, 5 chances. Now here is where the story stops being about guns and starts being about engineering irony. The F-35A's internal gun, the one mounted inside the airframe, the one that was supposed to be the elegant answer, has been documented by the Pentagon's own Director of Operational Test and Evaluation as failing to meet its accuracy requirements. The mounting brackets on F-35A production lots were found to be misaligned. The true alignment of each gun was, in the words of the DOT&E report, unknown. Different aircraft in the same fleet had guns pointing in slightly different directions than their sight reticles predicted. And then the cracking started. When the gun fires, 3,700 pounds of recoil transmits through the internal mount into the China longeron, the structural ridge that runs along the upper fuselage and defines the F-35's stealth shaping. The composite skin that wraps that longeron was not designed for cyclic shock loading at gun firing frequency. F-35As from Lot 9 onward began returning from flights with cracks in the outer mold line coatings and the underlying skin near the gun muzzle. The Air Force restricted the gun to combat use only on those aircraft. No training, no peacetime firing. The cracking was too costly. The external pod has none of these problems. The external pod sits on the centerline hardpoint, the same mount point that carries 2,000-pound bombs. The recoil load transmits through the hardpoint into the main longitudinal beam, a structural member designed for thousands of pounds of weapons. The pod's carbon fiber shell is mechanically isolated from the airframe. The gun fires, the pod absorbs the impulse, and the aircraft barely registers it. DOT&E's own reports confirmed that the F-35B and F-35C gun pods met the accuracy specifications. 5 milliradian dispersion, no cracking, no restrictions. The gun that was forced outside is more accurate than the gun engineered to live inside, is more reliable than the gun designed for stealth, is mounted to the only variant that the Air Force does not fly. But none of that, the recoil engineering, the cracking, the accuracy, is the part of this story that actually matters. The part that matters is the pod itself, because the shell that Terma built to carry that gun was never just a gun pod. It was certified as a multi-mission pod from the beginning of its development at the 2012 Farnborough Air Show. Same outer mold line, same drag profile, same radar cross-section signature, the aerodynamic envelope clearance, the radar testing, the flight envelope qualification, hundreds of millions of dollars of certification work has already been done. Terma has delivered more than 100 of these pods to operators around the world, and inside the same shell the company has developed variants designed to carry something other than a gun. An electronic warfare jammer, drawing on Raytheon's next-generation jammer midband technology, giving an F-35 a fraction of the electronic attack capability of an EA-18G Growler from a single centerline station. A signals intelligence package turning the pod into a flying SIGINT collection node. A directional data link allowing the F-35 to command a formation of collaborative combat aircraft drones, Kratos XQ-58 Valkyries, Anduril Roadrunners, the unmanned wingmen that the Air Force and Navy are building right now, from a forward stealth platform that nobody can see. A directed energy system with a generator and a laser designed to burn incoming missiles out of the sky. Same shell, same drag, same certification, different brain inside. This is the part that almost nobody covers properly. Because the F-35A, the variant with the internal gun mounted inside the elegant flush panel, has a 4-barrel cannon in that volume for the next 40 years. Whether the mission needs it or not. Whether the round count of 180 is too small for sustained close air support or not. Whether the cracking is fixed or not. That space inside the F-35A's fuselage is a gun, permanently. The F-35B and the F-35C have nothing inside, which means they have a slot outside, and a slot is a different thing from a gun. A slot is a question asked fresh before every sortie. What does this mission need? A burst of 25mm for danger close fire support. Mount the pod with the gun. A SIGINT collection run over the Caspian. Swap in the ISR variant. A controlled CCA formation orbiting 50 miles ahead of the strike package. Install the data link. An air defense layered escort against incoming hypersonics. the directed energy variant, if and when it matures. The internal gun is a commitment. The external slot is a question. The engineers who ran out of room did not set out to invent a modular weapons station architecture. They set out to solve a problem. The lift fan was in the way, the fuel tanks were in the way, the carrier landing gear was in the way. Hanging the gun outside was an admission of failure. The elegant answer was unavailable, so the compromise answer had to do. But the compromise grew. The B-21 Raider, the strategic stealth bomber rolling out of Northrop Grumman's plant in Palmdale, will carry no internal gun. The next-generation air dominance fighter, the F-22 successor that the Air Force is building right now, will probably carry no internal gun either. The era of every fighter having a cannon in its bones is ending. The era of every aircraft having a payload slot, a certified outer mold line that can hold whatever the war demands tomorrow, is beginning. Look closely at the F-35B and the F-35C when they fly clean, without the gun pod attached, and you can see the slot waiting, empty, available, cleared by years of testing, ready for whatever Terma or Raytheon or Lockheed Martin builds for it next decade. The same slot that started out as a workaround for a packaging problem is now the most valuable piece of real estate on either aircraft. The F-35A chose its answer in 2006 and has lived with the consequences for 20 years. The F-35B and F-35C were forced into a different answer. Which one ended up with more room to grow? The defect became the platform.